The evidence of giants that existed upon the earth is astounding. How can we say in modern times that these large beings did not walk the earth? Through ancient civilizations and even the Bible, there are records of accounts of giants. Stay tuned, see what we can unravel on today's broadcast.
You know these people.
Oh.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to FOJC Underground Church. My name is Brian Reese, and I will be your host tonight. I'll be filling in for David. Usually David's right by my side. I'm usually the co-host, but tonight I will be the host for tonight's program. Give a big shout out to Donna and David Carrico for allowing me to do this program. It's one of my favorite topics. Welcome everybody to the program. Welcome everybody to the broadcast. Let me know where you are, where you're from, what part of the world you are from, because we have a lot of different, wide variety of different places on this earth where people listen to FOJC. So give us a big shout out, hit that like button, let us know where you're from in the chat, share this thing out, subscribe. It helps with FOJC and fighting against the algorithm, which is very complex in this day and age. But please share this out, and welcome to the program. I'm glad to be part of this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So let's introduce ourselves to this Giants on the Earth Everywhere broadcast. So this is one of those topics where the evidence is astounding but why there's such a huge cover-up, right? That academia seems to be have their tentacles in everything. Like in every single thing, the biggest question is, what does the government know? Like, what's going on? What's the Smithsonian know? What's all these small organizations that have this huge, let's just say, they're huge pockets into this huge so-called conspiracy that is actually really a fact? So, let's get into some truths, okay? Let's get into some stuff we actually know of. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, the biblical narrative, is Genesis 6. I love this verse so much, and it's one of my favorite topics, so here we go. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. This verse alone, when you read it in the church today, they claim it's the sons of Seth, which gets underneath my skin, literally. But that is not the case. What's compelling about the whole thing, it seems that people don't want to read about what happened, what was going on 150 to 200 years ago. And that's astonishing to me. There's that word astonishing again. What we have to take in consideration for anyone out there, with these naysayers out there with this topic, I hear a lot of naysaying when we have these type of conversations. Some people say there was no giants. The narrative is they're clean cut. It's just the sons of Seth across the board. It's just wicked men being evil, and they had the devil in them, and they're just a bunch of cannibals, right? That's what was taught to me once upon a time in my walk. And you think to yourself, you're like, is this a programming? Is this some kind of conditioning? Why is there such a cover-up? You know, and so we're going to take a look in the 1800s, the 1900s, and this verse, if we could time travel and go back to those days, 200, 300 years ago, this verse was talked about in very, very distinct detail and complexity to explain where the giants came from and where the evidence is and the origin of this. And the pulpits today, it seems like they literally just shrug it off, and it doesn't even hold any kind of value anymore. And that just baffles the mind in general to me. So we have, back in the day at the pulpits, they was talking about the Amorites, the Hittites, the Zimazus, the Nephilim. And so what do you guys think? That, to me, baffles my mind. So let's continue on here. I have a few things I want to talk about. Some newspaper articles, right? Some newspaper. Let's get a different witness. Let's get into, we have Genesis 6 verse 4. Let's get into a different witness as far as an account of a actual newspaper document, which was forever ago. As you can see here, it says Plymouth Weekly Democrat. It's let's see here. I have the document here. It's a little bit small to read, a little bit small tune there to read that. One moment, I have it in front of me. It says Plymouth, Indiana. Plymouth, Indiana. It is a Indiana, Thursday, May the 28th, 1868. That we want to make sure we emphasize these newspapers, the dates. So here it is in 1868. It talks about here, when you see this part of this article here, this little section here, it's talking about the giants of antiquity, of originally a phenomenon. They was talking about the Norfolk giants and other entities and other things at that time. And they're talking about the Pangonian giants, right? The Pangonian giants, a lot of people don't know that actually was a thing that happened in the Pangonian giants. Was a very, very well documented event. So this Plymouth newspaper goes on and proceeds to talk about the titans of the tradition of these things, impending, provoking the deluge of once again, the Raphaim, the inhabiting Palestine, right? Palestine. And they're talking about the Amkin and these gigantic stature. Just in this little article here, it talks about just that alone in 1868. Could you imagine being a fly on the wall back in those days? And everybody knew there was gigantic, and they would talk about titans, and they was well informed on what they was reading. And to me, that just today, when you look in 2024 and you see that people will get into online debates and they'll fight over literally just so simple scripture, and they'll say it's just evil men, wickedness, and all this stuff, and then they'll dismiss the giant, there's 36 tribes of giants in the Old Testament, and they dismiss it, and it's baffling. So the next one, this one got me too, so keep in mind the dates. Keep in mind the dates, folks, because I want to make sure we emphasize the dates. So this one's the Oasis newspaper. It's couldn't hone in on where this was, and I think it might have been Pennsylvania. Forgive me, I don't have the particular state corrected there, but this is on Saturday, November the 12th, 1910. This newspaper clipping is talking about the title, "The Men Before Adam." Isn't that kind of interesting? And this is actually referring to a church. In this title of the Sunday evening address to be delivered to a congregational church on November the 13th at 7:30 p.m. And it talks about this part one of this most interesting subject delivered in a popular style. And it goes on here. It says, all thinkers invited to hear this address. The topics to be discussed will be as follows. In this order, the Raphaim, who they were. The Nephilim, who they were. Archaeology, geology, and scripture harmonized. Problem with atheist. Who built and dwelled the cities of Bashan? American pre-Adamite relics remains of the giants. The Irish mixed with giants. You all correlated, invited to hear the unique topic discussed. Bring your friends. It talks about, and it refers to the minister at that time, referring to this Oasis newspaper. So not only that, we have this 1910, so let's just keep those dates. We got the late 1800s, we got the early 1900s. Let's go to one more newspaper, This one was an unknown newspaper, but I honed it in. It was early 1900s. Once again, New Orleans. This one, the title is Holy Land of Canaan, of Palestine. And it says, Bashan, its kings and oaks. Bashan was a district of country on the east side of the River Jordan. It is not like many ancient districts of Palestine, distinguished by a consistent design, but sometimes called the land of Bashan, and the children of Gad dwelled over against them, the land of Bashan. This goes on and refers to some scripture here, Numbers 21:33, 1 Chronicles 5:11-12, which was interesting because that Numbers 21:33 is talking about the grasshopper incident. Well, not incident, but the account. And then it even mentions Deuteronomy 5:10-13, and then Joshua 12:5, just in this newspaper clipping. Well, I will say this, folks. Anybody watching this program, I can assure you that these newspapers are just a dime in a dozen for what you can find. But I will warn everybody watching this, these articles are becoming harder to find, harder and harder to find. Plus, if you want to access some of them, literally, the archives in some cases have to pay pretty good amount of money to obtain them, which is, I think, bizarre. And I think it's, if it's such a secret, you have to pay high-end money to be able to obtain just a few newspaper clippings. What's up with that? So you know that you're on the right trail, right? You're on the rabbit trail. But see, these paper clippings, etc., I've seen them where you had to pay subscription fees and everything. And even you can find these documents. You can find these newspaper documents at your local, literally in these small towns. You can find them in their archives sections. Wherever their archives are, some of them are in the courthouse, libraries, if it's an older library. I've seen all kinds of different, let's just say excuses where they move all the so-called, let's just say, artifacts on these ancient documents. So one would ponder on these newspapers will give you, like, all the gears are turning your imagination. It makes you really ponder. And once again, I'll ask this question. Why the big cover up, right? What does the government and what does these institutions have to gain from keeping the public in the dark on this? So we got these giant skeletons. We have the conditioning of the public to a false narrative. What is that? So, a lot of people don't know this, but we're going to get into a public figure. There's a public figure that is very well known. We studied it in school when as a young child, and even up to today, they still talk about this gentleman. Let's talk about this public figure. We know who it is. The old public figure, the politician, the president of the United States at one time. We got Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln was born on February the 12th, 1809 in Laro County, Kentucky. So we have this public figure here. There's a lot of rumors, and I got some Indiana friends out there. There's people who debate this all the time. It's kind of funny, but hey, you just can't make it up. But Laro County, Kentucky. A lot of people think that he was born in Indiana, but that's not true. He was born in Kentucky, then moved to Indiana. But the interesting part is he is born in Kentucky. So hold that thought, because this Kentucky topic is going to come back up in the program here in a little bit. So, something to take in to note, right? And let's get back on the Nephilim and the giants. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln, written down, and supposedly from what I have heard in the speech, he did a speech on the topic of the mysteries of the Niagara Falls. And I come across this like maybe 2 years ago, a year ago or something. Maybe it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. What is mind-boggling on what he had to say about these mysteries of the Niagara Falls. So guess what? Here on FOJC Radio today, we are going to talk about it. So this handwritten account of Abraham Lincoln, between September and October, approximately those times of 1848, there's that date again. So we have, here we are in the mid-1800s, and then we have another witness of literally newspaper articles from the late 1800s and 1900s and all that. So, but let's just see what Abe had to say here. So this is the fragment of the Niagara Falls, right? This is what he said, in quote, "Niagara Falls, by what mysterious power is it that millions and millions are drawn from all parts of the world to gaze upon the Niagara Falls? There is no mystery about the thing itself. Every effect is such an intelligent, as any intelligent man, knowing the causes, would anticipate without seeing it. If the water moving onward in a great river reaches a point where there is a perpendicular jog of 100 feet in distance, in the bottom of the river, it is plain the water will have a violent, continuous plunge at the point. It is also plain that the water, thus plunging, will foam and roar and send up a mist continuously, in which last during sunshine there will be perpetual rainbows. The mere physical of the Niagara Falls is only this. Yet this is really a very small part of the world's wonder. I wonder what else Abraham Lincoln knew. It's a power to excite reflection and emotion is its great charm. The geologists have demonstrated that the plunge or the fall was once a Lake Ontario and wore its way back to its present position. I thought that was interesting to take into account. He will ascertain how fast it is wearing now, and so get a basis for determining how long it had been wearing back from Lake Ontario, and finally demonstrate by that the world is at least 14,000 years old. I would yet to debate that, but I think it's interesting that he said 14,000 years old. A philosopher of a slightly different term will say Niagara Falls is only the lip of the basin out which pours all the surplus water which rains down on 2,000 or 3,000 square miles of the Earth's surface. He will estimate approximately accuracy that 500,000 tons of water with its full weight distance of 100 feet each minute, thus exerting a force equal to the lifting of the same weight through the same space in the same time. And then further reflection comes that the vast amount of water consistently pouring down is supplied by equal amount consistently lifted by the sun. Isn't that one interesting? Lifted by the sun. Hello. And still he says if this much is lifted up for this one space of 200,000 or 300,000 square miles, an equal amount must be lifted for each other equal space. And he is overwhelmed in the contemplation of the vast power of the sun consistently exerting in the quiet, noiseless operation of lifting water up to rain down again. But still there is more. It calls up the infinitive part when Columbus first sought this continent. Listen to this part, folks. When Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the land, or from his hand of his maker, then as now Niagara was roaring here, the eyes of the species of the extinct giants whose bones filled the mounds of America have gazed upon Niagara as ours do now. Contemporary with the whole race of men, and older the first man Niagara is strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth, the mastodon now so long dead that fragments of those monstrous bones alone testify that they ever lived have gazed on the Niagara. And that long time never sat still for a single moment, never dried, never froze, never slept, never rested. So that is the recording of Mr. Lincoln. So what did Mr. Lincoln have? What did he know? He had to have top-tier clearance, right? When he was the president of the United States, he might have known more than they do today, more than likely. So here's what happened to the shift. So you had this shifting in let's just say the narrative and the lies that started to manifest, right? So we have more and more Renaissance missions, hands down. And applications started to move across the land in America. Farmers and landowners started reporting more and more that their lands have been an archaeology dream, an anomaly of evidence that would prove the biblical narrative and other ancient tales and cultures of old. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff here, everybody, that when you think about that, if President Abraham Lincoln was making these comments, and then the early 1900s, the late 1800s, I've got tons of documentation that they started doing large amounts of excavations after this commentary and speech. So, hence in the early 1800s, the great earthquake that happened in the Madrid, and then all these discussions and discoveries, right? So we have, proofs of small resets. We have, this is a huge topic for me that I'm getting ready to mention. When you have the Tartarian Empire cover-up, I will say that, but today I'm going to be bringing up some more interesting topics and a few books here in a little bit that's going to blow your mind. And to understand what has went on in our past, right? It seems that the powers that be want to move and shake info, right? And they want to fabricate lies and deceit and spoon feed. They want to spoon feed us in different takes and move our minds away from biblical truths. Let's just face the facts. Legitimately. That is I think one of the devil's tools is to really push that agenda. Just to really get us away from biblical truths. So, let's get back to old Abe for a second. Let's get back to old Abe Lincoln, and let's talk about, with his writings and his speech that we just talked about, and those giants and those mounds across America documented. That's a documented account. And right off the bat, old wise Abe knew something, right? He knew something that nobody else had even brought up. Even in I can't even find any other account that any president before him would even mention anything about the Nephilim or the giants, the extinct giants that was in the mounds. Okay, so I have this speculation. I have something I want to throw in here for everybody here. So old wise Abe had some kind of either preconceived knowledge or something to that effect. But let's just throw it out here. Me and Brother David Carrico did a program on JFK not too long ago, and there was similarities, right? There's similarities in old JFK and Abraham Lincoln. And let's get into that. Let's talk about this for a minute. So, I thought about it. Before the three-letter word even came about, you had this, the UFO, I'm referring to UFOs. Isn't it interesting that the giant narrative, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit more in the program, I think it goes hand in hand with all these secret service, secret government cover-ups, and it's all connected in some shape or form. When we're talking about fallen angels, the Genesis 6 narrative, that three-letter word, that UFO wasn't even around. Well, it was referred to something else back then. Back in the day of Egypt and other times and other ancient cultures, they talked about Venamas. Well, Mr. Abraham Lincoln must have knew something, a thing or two, in my opinion. So, isn't it interesting? We haven't even talked about this. So we're going to get into the Abrahams from Kentucky. But check this out. Not only is he from Kentucky, does anybody know that Abraham Lincoln was a pretty tall gentleman? He was a pretty tall guy. Abraham Lincoln, 6'4". That's a pretty good sized man for even back in the day in the 1800s. That's a pretty good sized tall individual. So on the right side, everybody can knows who that is. Mr. Donald Trump on the right hand side of the screen. He's a 6'3". I always knew that he was a very tall president. But isn't it just strange that there's all this tall rulers, right? You can go back and look into the giant narrative. I think there's all kinds of different authors out there, different people that's done some really intensive research talking about the Caesars of old, and there's some great kings of old from England, etc. that was a tall stature, 7'6", 8'1". I mean, you name it, they was beyond an NBA or beyond any kind of basketball player of modern time. So what is that, right? So when I think about the size of Donald Trump and then Sir Lincoln here, has anybody ever thought about that Mr. Trump has a son? He is the youngest son. And a lot of people, I was blown away. I was blown away. I knew that he had a younger son, but I did not know how he grew up pretty fast. Okay, from whenever Mr. Trump was president, Barron Trump is 6'7". Just want to throw it in there. Donald Trump's 6'3". His son triumphs over his dad as far as the height, and I think that's something to take in consideration based off the topic of this program. So, we talked about, I'm going to try to watch what I say on this program. We talked about the similarities of JFK, the similarities with Abraham Lincoln, aliens, fallen angels. But Mr. Trump has been in that I guess category of, talking back to and fro about different things. There's all this speculation, all this controlled opposition with the media talking about that Mr. Trump knows about the UFOs. All that. And I just want to document that too. It's just kind of strange. Something to ponder on. So get this. Ladies and gentlemen, this one you can't deny it. There's probably people out there in Illinois. Check this out. Anybody out there in Illinois, give me a shout out here. And if you've ever seen this in Springfield, Illinois, this is back on Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln has this strange and wild, it's wild to me, that there's a 30-foot tall statue of Abraham Lincoln, young Abe, mind you, young Abe, and it's at a fairgrounds. Mind you, and 30 foot. So whoever it is, I'm not putting them down, whoever it was that come up with this creation and this statue here to remember Abraham Lincoln, I thought it was kind of interesting. Why couldn't you go 10 foot? Why couldn't you go 15? But I understand it's probably for promotional standpoints and all that to get people to actually see what's going on, and it's at one of the gates of the fairgrounds. I get it. But are we taking a little overboard? That's the question. Are we taking a little bit overboard to catching old Abraham Lincoln's image? To me, this is the kind of stuff. This is the kind of things that defragments the mind and makes you think that giants are a fantasy, right? They're really good at subliminal messaging with Hollywood and tilling the mind and cultivating these neural pathways and planting the wrong seed. And then when you look at the Genesis 6 narrative and you see all these messages and these statues and you think it's just all folklore and fantasy and nonsense. Well, let's go to one other place that's really, really well known. It's really well known. It's at Washington, Lincoln Memorial. I wanted to use this old picture. Look at the size of an average man and look at this large throne of Abraham Lincoln. It's a massive statue, right? To literally memorialize Lincoln. And I just think that's interesting to take in consideration. There's always this gigantic stature everywhere. Like, what's going on with that? Like, is there a spiritual thing? Is there some kind of spiritual application? Because, we all know that this was a huge endeavor back in the day. And the money that even had to go upon this to put his image and make this was unbelievable to me. I couldn't even fathom like how much money even back then and how much it would be to do this now. Could you imagine? So, you remember everybody that was watching a little bit, several minutes ago on the program here, I talked about, or hold that thought about Abraham Lincoln. He was born in Kentucky, right? The exact place is LaRue County. So we're going to go to LaRue County, and I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you something that I think is very intriguing and something to document. And it's a little bit further distance from me in Kentucky, but we're gonna chime in here, and I'm gonna show you all something here that is something to document. So this is LaRue County, Kentucky. It's on Google Earth here. Hodgenville, Kentucky. But you all know if you've all followed anything that I do on Visual Disturbance Channel or anything I've done here on FOJC, I'm a big fan of Google Earth, and I try to navigate around through things. I always try to find intriguing things. But this one stumped me. And I had to go there. So we're at Larue County, Kentucky. Let's zoom in. Larue County, Lincoln Square. If you watch the program that we did with me and Brother David on the JFK program, this one baffled my mind. I can't emphasize it enough. The statue of Abraham Lincoln, and for just to make a small note here, I am not putting down on this county, nor I'm from Kentucky. I'm just appreciating the let's just see what we have here. I'm gonna try to wordplay it a little bit. Let's watch what we say here on YouTube, but I don't want to ever put down anybody's architect work or anything like that. But I want to show you that this, to me, obviously it's Lincoln Square, but check out obviously there's semis rotating around. But I've said this a bunch of times. You see these type of random circular streets all over England, all over Paris, Spain, all over the place that they do this. And there's this Lincoln statue, and he's observing. Well, lo and behold, you have these four corners, right? And almost, if you get into biblical cosmology, I'm going to leave it at that. But if you get into biblical cosmology, you look at all these different, let's just say, plane of existent maps, the topography back in the day. You got four corners. You got something here. It looks, there's northwest, south, and east. But then you have Abraham Lincoln right here. And we're going to zoom in. So something I will note when we go into the street view. Okay, I'm going to go into the street view. I'm going to zoom right in on here. So you see Abraham Lincoln here, and you see this whole town square, right? So I looked at Larue County. I have mapped out like 80-something counties in Kentucky that have evidence of Indian mounds. Literally, not just one, not just two. Some cases, and like I think the smallest county that I ever found was like 5. And then there's like 20. And then there's like 10 or 13 or whatever. This county, I cannot find any survey work. But in the books that I've read in Larue County, they found this massive, let's just say it's like a wall structure. It's one of the biggest places, one of the biggest walls-like structures in Kentucky back in the day, as far as, let's just say, the term I'm getting ready to refer to during the program, prehistoric man. So let's just check out this enigmatic place out here, right? So let's just say there's a lot of places that I've researched all over the place. In this barrier that I referred to, I thought it was interesting. Every time I've looked at a structure, an ancient place, an Indian mound, back in the day, they would start with the Indian mound. And then they would literally either excavate it, and then they would somehow put a marker up. A lot of it has to do, you'll hear a lot of things with Squire Boone, Daniel Boone, but this particular site here, I'm just going to speculate. It's all speculation on my part. I wonder if there was a mound right here. If anybody has any evidence or anything like that, get in contact with me because I really would appreciate it. In Larue County, Kentucky, I feel like there's a mound here, or used to be. That's just me speculating, but based off what I'm seeing, you have four corners, and it's a marker, okay? It's a marker. Even though Abraham Lincoln is memorialized here and forever will be in this plaza until the world ends or whatever, this particular place is highly compelling. And I'm going to document this because this is all speculation once again. I feel like there'd be a mound here. That's just my opinion. Take it for what it is. But what do you guys think? The spiraling, I love that they even put the markers because it shows you that the yellow lines where it can coordinate how you go around it. And I've said it again. I'll say it before I move on. When we talked about the JFK program and we talked about harmonization, talking about sound frequency and all that, all day long. And it's probably a small town, but all day long, people driving all around this in a circle formation. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to get into all kinds of rabbit holes with that. I wonder what this actually is and what went down. I'm talking 1,000 years ago. What was here at this location in Laro County, Kentucky. Let me know if anybody knows about that. Get back in contact with me because I really would like to know. But there was a big wall that would go upon what they refer to as prehistoric man, which I had to document for this program. So, you have this strange square, okay? And every time, the reason why I'm saying the stuff that I'm saying, and there is speculation to where I think there's a mound here, but I've been a bunch of different locations, and each location either the mound is deemed worthy to keep from being demolished, and they'll put like a recreational area for children or something, or a park or some type of like strange thing to kind of like use it as a tourist kind of thing. And that, to me, is something worthy to document. To me, we could go on a big tangent. There were some individuals that talked about like incubation, different spiritual applications when it comes to the Nephilim and what they used to do back in the day, thousands of years ago. We're not even going to go there. But to me, when you're putting a place with ancient significance only God knows what's went on here with, sacrificial stuff or whatever kind of nonsense. I'm not saying that's what went on here in Laro County, Kentucky, but I know there's been a bunch of them documented in Kentucky where it was prehistoric villages and there was all kinds of nonsense going on. For sure. Okay. So, all right, let's get back on it. So, this from Abraham Lincoln's, from what he said back in 1848, okay, to modern times, right? So we have this manipulation. They keep renaming things, and it has occurred through like different times. Like so back in the day, even the early 1900s, like I said earlier in this video, in this program here, the giants and the mounds, everybody knew it. Angels' involvement, all that, they knew it. But then you started seeing it started dwindling. It started diminishing, right? It went from like the 1930s, like I mentioned earlier, military renaissance missions, and everything just started, like academia started taking over and literally wiping everything off. And literally just, it didn't take nothing. And heck, they didn't even have computers back then. Look how easy it was to manipulate. My goodness. So, not only was they teaching the Nephilim and the giants back in the day, but guess what? And lo and behold, we have the sons of Seth. So the sons of Seth is a huge thing. Me and Brother David did a program on that too, not too long ago. The sons of Seth has nothing to do with the angels that took the daughters of men and bore giants. And a lot of people get into like a lot of confliction with that, but I'm just going to leave it there. So, we want another witness. We need another witness. So, I want to read from a book. I'm turning into David Carrico. I'm trying to like touch the surface on what Brother David has done for 40 plus years. God bless you, David. I know you're watching. So, big shout out to David, and I pray that all is well at the Carricos. So, let's continue on. So, there's a book. Not many people know about this book. So, let's get into this book here. This book, I've only talked about it one time, and it's been a while, but I didn't touch base on this topic that I'm getting ready to refer to. So this book here, The Catholic Church in the Niagara Peninsula, 1626 through 1895 by Dean Harris. The Catholic Church, the Catholic Church in the Niagara Peninsula. So there's a lot of stuff to uncover here. So hang on to your seat, folks, because this one's going to be a really good one. This is one of the ones I've been wanting to bring up for a long time. So we're going to talk. There's a lot of stuff to hear, so hang on. This one's going to really intrigue you. So this book. So we have the Catholic Church here. So Mr. David Boyd, a Canadian archaeologist, opened on the shores of Lake Erie, near the present town of Port Corbin and a surely of an Indian burial mound. A number of skeletons were exposed, and fragments of pottery and clay and stone pipes. Flint, arrowheads, stone axes, rods, and beads of wampum were found among the bones. For more than 200 years, these relics of a once, here's where we got to point out, of a once brave and populous nation laid hidden in this huge grave. So I want to stop there for a minute. There's evidence and evidence just in Kentucky in the Ohio Valley. I cannot emphasize this enough. From the Serpent Mound all the way down to Tennessee, inundated with all kinds of, literally, it's been handed down from, public, literally, grandpa, grandma, from all generations. And they'll tell these stories of what these pilgrims and the villagers or whoever, what they did back in the day. So I'm going to continue on here. Silence, eloquence, stronger than words, the story of the vanished people. In a 200 more years, in all probability, all saved a few imperishable stone tomahawks that the earth contains of a great nation will have entirely disappeared, returning to its parent dust. Archaeologists and students of prehistoric times almost unanimously agree that before the occupation of this continent by the American Indian, another race of men more populous and civilized possessed the land. The great mounds of Mississippi Valley, Indiana, North Ohio, Wisconsin, the carved pipes, the copper and the iron weapons, and delicately wrought ornaments found in these mounds. Keep that in thought, folks, for the ornaments. I'm going to get back to that here in a second. The fortifications constructed on a geometric lines indicate a knowledge of engineering, points to an order of civilization much in advance of that of an Indian of history. So once again, remember when I said earlier, resets, small pocket resets. What's going on? John Pounders, David Carrico has done a very awesome job, an intensive job on very complex on the Tartarians and the Tartars. Is what I'm reading here, is that something to do? Is there something here to tie in, maybe, that there's some type of advanced, that triumphs that's above, that was beyond the Indian culture? But hey, I will tell you this. My neck of the woods, they just deemed it Indian right off the bat. And I'm not putting down the Indian culture at all. I have Indian blood in me. The problem is, who was here before them? And the Indians will tell you that. The Indians said, in all kinds of different locations, we just come and set up shop because these sun worshippers or whoever it was had advanced technology. We just set up shop because, hey, it was inhabitable. We could sit back and it was just these cities was evacuated. Let's just go in here and set up shop. I digress. Let's continue on. So we have these mounds. Let's get back on these mounds and fortifications tell us that along prior to obliterated forest and the Indians who roamed them at the time, there existed another people gifted with many of the characteristics belonging to the nations of civilized tendencies. Before the Indian hunter wandered, there o'er the great river valleys were foreshadowed. With their ancient forest nations dwelled in those valleys, practicing arts, rites which involve many germs of civilization. We're going to refer to Mr. Wilson's Prehistoric Man, but on that, this ancient people constructed levees to hold in check to utilize the waters of Wabash of Mississippi for the purposes of agriculture and irrigation. The number of mounds left by them suppresses belief. More than 10,000 tumuli and the 10,000 enclosures have been found in the state of Ohio alone. After a careful study of these works, it is impossible to resist the conviction that these builders possess considerable knowledge of science and defense. Science and defense. Wow. And just to throw this in here, Star Force is coming. Star Force is coming. I'm just making an announcement. Me and Brother David are going to be doing a Star Force program, which this book is referring to is exactly what they're talking about with this ancient science and defense. So, their number and magnitude and their regular lines in which they were constructed led up to the conclusion that the builders were a very numerous and powerful people. I guess that shows that there was Nephilim that we're referring to that was great and powerful, of great stature, that dominated the lands with fear tactics and everything, and with all kinds of military applications way back in the day. Why don't you go ask them back in Numbers when they talked about that, when we can get into that, what we referred to earlier in the biblical narrative. So let's continue on. The Great Mound of Chahokee, a truncated pyramid between East St. Louis and Alton, is 90 feet in height, while its square size are 7 to 500 feet respectively. On the south side of the mound was a trellis, 150 by 300 feet, approached by a graded way. Its flattened summit was 200 by 450 feet, and its construction ingeniously must have been used. This mound could not have been built without a knowledge of regular scales of measurement and instruments for determining the angles, squares, and circles. Furthermore, if the tablet was found in the Mound of Ohio be genuine, and many good authorities claim it to be so, then the mound builders must possess an alphabet or held intercourse with the people who did. They also, who would appear possessed with an accurate system of weights from the arms of the skeleton found in one of their tombs, were taken bracelets of copper of uniform size, weighing preciously 4 ounces. So I want to chime in real quick when it's talking about the intercourse of people, right? They're talking about mating with other, and also referring to picking up their traditions and everything. So that's what I'm saying again. So here we go. What is going on? Is there a Tartar connection here? That's where I'm gravitating to, because when you see that, the Tartars and Tartarians did have more of a gigantic stature about them in some shape or form. They was taller in size. And then it goes on. We're going to refer back to this peninsula. Let's continue on. And again, take their defense earthworks, the most extensive of which is probably that of Fort Hill, Ohio. This stronghold is on the summit of a hill 500 feet above the bed of a river which flows by its sloping defenses. The wall measures more than 1.5 miles in length and encloses an area of 48 acres in extent, covered a few years ago with gigantic trees. There's that gigantic word again. One of them measured 21 feet and another 23 feet in circumference. In the Travels in the North America writes, their 800 concentric circles were counted in one of the trees near the mound. And he is of the opinion that there are more than 1,000 years have passed away since those works were constructed. The authors of the ancient mounds of Mississippi Valley, who acted under the instructions of the United States government, made very accurate and elaborate surveys telling us that the earthworks of this prehistoric people are not only accurate squares and perfect circles, but are in many cases considering corresponding dimensions, each square being 1880 feet aside and diameter of each of the larger and the smaller circles a fraction of 1,700 to 800 feet. They added that the core response could not the result of an accident, but goes to prove that these ancient people possess a standard of a measurement, means of determining angles, instruments, and knowledge of their use. The most advanced Indian tribes since the discovery of America could not even do this, that's what they're saying here. And an intellectual development as they possessed by these people. This is unheard of what they're referring to in this Catholic Church in Niagara Peninsula. So what is that? So what do we have here? Do we have something here, knowledge of a particular characters? We got some fallen angel manipulation. What do we have here? Do we have the sons of God literally coming in and giving knowledge? What is this? I can only speculate. Let's continue on what we're reading here. The most skillful engineer of our own day, writes the author of The Prehistoric Man, will find it difficult without the aid of instruments to lay down the accurate square on the scale of some of these described enclosing in the area 4/5 of a mile of circumference. Circles of modern dimensions might indeed be constructed as long as the possible describe them by the radius. But with such works measuring 5,400 feet or upwards of a mile in circumference, these ancient geometrics must have instruments and a minute means of measurements arcs, for it seems impossible to convince or accurate construction of figures on such a scale, otherwise than by finding the angle by its area from station to station, though the whole course of their realization, it is no less obvious from the correspondence in the area the relative proportions of many of the regular enclosures that the mound builders possessed a recognized standard of measurement and then a peculiar significance, possibly of an astronomical origin. What was attached to certain figures of certain forms and dimensions, that they possessed a cruel knowledge of military engineering, and evident from the remains of their fortifications, walls, and ditches. How, for example, shall we account for the existence of their graded ways like unto that of it's totally, let's just use the word, I shouldn't use it, unnecessary. I'm going to use that word. Continue on this book because we got a lot to cover. Here in the avenue have been excavated leading up to the considerable height. A trellis after trellis have been the height of 80 and a width of 215. From earth taken from the approach, high embankments were constructed on each side of the ascent. With few years were covered with trees of enormous size. Further on, the earthworks were thrown up, which in the construction point to knowledge of defense engineering. Clark's works on the North Fork of Point Creek in the Silico Valley embraces on the main defenses and uniform rectangular outworks of the area of 127 acres. Here the bed of the river was changed to allow the builders freedom to carry the original design into amid of the complete circuits of the walls, when in 1842, there's that 1800s again, excavations were made in their works. The valuable remains of ancient art were brought to light, including fragments and carved ivory, many pieces of sculpture. Here's one, folks. This will get you going. Me and Brother David we do a program, the Cities Lost in Time program. Our first one was Chichen Itza. I'm going to read what it says here. You can't make this stuff up. They found this in the mound. They found coiled serpents chiseled out of stone and overlaid with a sheet of mica, which I'm going to be bringing up here in a little bit. A sheet of mica, coiled serpents chiseled out and overlaid with a sheet of mica and copper. Hold that thought. That makes you think of some Quetzalcoatl, some snake symbolism there, right? Bizarro world, and the stuff that's went on for hundreds of forever since the beginning of time. Could you imagine finding this artifact and this type of stuff? In which I will continue on. I have seen a bunch of stuff here in Kentucky, but this certain incident here, oh my, let's continue on. Mr. Squire remarks that the amount of labor expanded into the construction of this work was impressive. The embankment measures 3 miles, 1 length, and carefully computed shows that, including mounds, not less than 3 million cubic feet of the earth were used in its construction. On the Little Miami River, Ohio, is a work having a circuit of 5 miles embankment, 25 feet in enclosure area that would give protection to 60,000 men. The Great Mound of Miamiburg, and 68 feet high and 852 feet in circumference, while the Grave Creek Mound of Virginia is 70 feet high and would require a chain 1,000 feet to griddle its base. We have seen these mounds, writes the American topographer Flint, which would require the labor of 1,000 men employed on their canals, with all their medical aids, and to implode of their labor for months. We have more than one hesitated in the view of one of these huge mounds where there were not really a natural hill, but they were uniform so placed in reference to adjacent country, and they're conforming to a so-called unique and similar there no eye hesitates long in referring. them to a class of artifact erections. To this day, there are traces of military fortifications left by the ancient people through central New York, northern Ohio, extending from Indiana to the banks of Wabash. These prehistoric man-made abode, the sun-dried brick mixed with brushes, they wrought in copper, silver, and lead. That's interesting, the silver and lead. And their evidence that they were understanding the smelting of metal and iron. Copper axes, bosses of ornaments, spearheads, bracelets, and rings with strange characters marked upon them have been recovered from their mounds. So, let's continue on. It talks about this one in Ohio in 1969 was uncovered large circular ornaments by a sword belt composed of copper overlaid with a thick plating of silver. Two or three pieces of copper tubing were also found, filled with iron rust and copper rivets of nails. Mr. Squire says these articles have been critically examined, and it is beyond doubt that the copper bosses were absolutely plated, not simply overlaid. Interesting. With silver. Between the copper and the silver exists a connection such as it seems to me could only be produced by heat. And admitted these genuine relics of these mound builders, it must at the same time be admitted these possess a difficult art of plating one plate upon another. There is but one alternative, that they had occasional and consistent, this is what it says, this is the words it says, consistent intercourse with people advanced in the arts. From those articles were obtained. There you go. I can't even make this up. This is what they're saying in this book here. And the first thing that comes to my mind, Genesis 6, they took wives, and they bore giants. There's all this, you can mark it down. Indian culture talked about it. The Anastasies, the Iroquois talked about, all the different tribes talked about getting knowledge from these ancient ones, right? Not the star people. They're talking about these giants. They're talking about these giant Indians, or that they'd take, there's all kinds of accounts that they would give up their women and children for technology. Isn't it just weird that this book is talking about this nonsense? It's unbelievable, everybody. Again, Dr. Hildreth is not mistaken. It's anodized iron or steel was also discovered in connection with the above remains, from which it follows the extraordinary conclusion that these mound builders were acquainted with the use of iron. The conclusion being, of course, subject to the improbable alternative already mentioned. From those mounds have been taken the squares, mating, delicately woven pieces of doubled and twisted fiber cloth, mouthpieces and stops for wind instruments, and goes on and on. They plated stone with cover, possessed various mechanical devices, were acquainted with their lathe, that they knew the use of the mound exceeded in carving. There is conflict opinion among writers on these ancient people to how far they have forgotten race penetrated westward. Mr. Florentine wrote that the mound builders never inhabited either the New England states nor the state of New York. Mr. Squire, who for a long time held the opposition opinion, now acknowledges that the force of evidence compelled him to alter his conviction that the traces of the mound buildings were evidence of lands of western New York. Mr. Squire says, in the full view of the facts, I am driven to conclusion, little anticipation from when I started my trip to the exploration of these earthworks, that I started upon my trip. The western New York were erected by the Iroquois or other western neighbors, and do not possess the antiquity of going farther back to the discovery of this country. It goes on. These large earthworks and mounds, essentially dissimilar from the 8 slight structures of the modern Indian, appear to stretch from the upper waters of Ohio to the westward of Lake Erie, and hence along the Lake of Michigan, nearly the copper regions of Lake Superior. So everybody, the Lake Superior, there's a huge depository of copper up that way. Apparently back in the day, they knew exactly what they was doing. They still use that today. So here we go. This is where it's getting really good. Previously, the occupation of the country and this present race of Indians, inhabited by a race of men much more populous and much more further advanced in civilization. I have several of their fortifications in their western part of the state. There is a large one in the town in Ohio, and one, it says Pompeii, and one in Malin. In a word, that there are scattered all over the country, from the Niagara River to the line of these fortifications, as considerable number of burial mounds, of who these history the Iroquois had no knowledge. 11 miles east of the present village of Lewistown, on a farm formerly occupied by John Grauld, was found a huge in the remains of an ancient fortification, which I have one out here out my way. We're going to talk about that some other time. In the burial mound, when the earth was removed, flags of sandstone were uncovered, and beneath them was a huge pit filled with human bones of both sexes and all the ages. In the position of the skeletons, there was none of the signs of an ordinary Indian burial. Remains of earthware, pieces of copper, instruments of rude workmanship was plunged upon the whole entire area. The ancient works of Fort Hill in western New York, discovered 40 years ago, shows a knowledge of defense upon the part of the builders surpassing the possessed by the American Indian. The skeletons found, the fortified enclosure were there of a race of men. I'm going to point this out. A race of men 1/3 larger than the Iroquois of Huron. The giant forest trees that grew upon these works were over 500 years old, and there were traces that another growth existed before men. Dr. Reynolds of Brockville, once in the held of the Gallows Rapids of St. Lars, about 15 feet below the surface, 20 skeletons. Some of the skeletons that he wrote were of gigantic proportion. The lower jaw of one significantly large to surround the corresponding bone of an adult of our generation. About 1.5 miles of the Shelby of New Orleans County in New York is a mound from which were taken skeletons of a giant size. There's another witness. Pieces of pottery, earthware, covered with patterns in relief, wrought with great skull. This was doubtless a spot written by Mr. Burroughs where a great battle had been fought. And no joke, this book says, were not these people a branch of the Aztecs? Wow. In the year 1809, one of the ancient fortifications on the middle branch of Buffalo Creek, 3.5 miles from the village of Aurora, was plunged of a copper plate 12 inches broad and 16 inches long. Upon it were graven characters extending in a whole length, which have not yet been deciphered. That was back in this time, so my goodness. Could you imagine what they could do with AI and what they could translate now? That it's a mysterious import will ever be known and scarcely be accepted. The language of this race, like the race itself, is unknown. I mean, my goodness. Like the Palagwal hieroglyphics, or those on the walls of the Temple of Philo at the first cataract, that's what it says, cataract of Nile. It has defiled the ingenious scholars and awaits the birth of American and all the unreal, revealing the secrets. Not only that, there's another place in 1847. Minnesota Mining Company discovered abandoned mine. It goes on, talking about provoking the mine and opened it up, worked there by a race of men who knew the value of copper for decoration, ornaments, and all the other purposes. And the American Indian, before coming of the French, knew nothing of copper, iron, or any other metal than stone. These ancient copper workers had opened the mines for 100 miles along the southern shore of Lake Superior on the Isle Royal centuries. It goes on. Lying in the east of the Kinawal Point, the rich iron district of Manicky is what appears to have been the ancient bed of river carp. And about 10 feet above the present level of a channel, various implements of weapons of copper were found. Later, trees grow on this deposit, and the evidence of antiquity seemed not less obvious, but then the relics include knives, spear, and lance heads, and arrowheads, some of which were an ornament with silver. One of the knives made with its handle out of the single piece of copper, measured together about 7 inches long, at which the blade was nearly 2/3 of entire length of oval shape. They went on in a Minnesota mine that the Smithsonian Institution, like we mentioned earlier, of course they always got their tentacles and everything. Smithsonian Institution weighs over, they was talking about the weight of it, weighs over 6 tons and showed, when found, numerous marks of tools of these ancient people. The miners had sunk a trench 26 feet deep, detached the copper block from its matrix, and that's what it says, and raised it on to the platform 8 feet high, which was preserved by water in which it was standing. The mining tools and the implements which were found near its mouth seemed to imply that the miners left their diggings in confusion and pointed to sudden attack or something happened in their presence, like they would nearly exterminated the New England Indians before the landing of the Pilgrims. But here's what it says: if these people were not of gigantic size, endowed with the corresponding strength, how was it possible for these to lift these enormous mass of copper into the cradle without machinery? Again, what use did they make of the great quantity of copper taken from the storm-beaten shores of Lake Erie? They left behind similar in shape to their own, and edges, temple drills, and copper, and which have not been known at all in Indian traditions. This mysterious race has left no other records behind in that those found in their minds, fortifications, and mounds. And as to what matter of people, who were they? Or where they came from, historians are unable to agree. The Catholic Church in Niagara Peninsula. I know I went long there on that book, but that had to be covered because I think it's very, very, very detrimental that I get that out, because I really do think that there's so much significance there. So much significance. Sorry I went long on that. Let's go to the next one. So we have this next witness. So I mentioned the word. I told you everybody to hold that thought on Mica. So let's go to this next book. I referred to it a minute ago, The Prehistoric Man, Volume 1, Sir Daniel Wilson. Sir Daniel Wilson is referring to, there's these human sacrifices, and I quote in this book, refers to prehistoric man. I want to bring this up. There's this Mica connection that I want to bring this up, but I want to also talk about the human sacrifices in these circular mounds, which was covered in altars on which was sacrificed fires of ancient worshippers. Appear to have been upon a blaze. The greater number of their works of art and even the implements of weapons have been found. And it seems that they go on to grave mounds, they mains of their death, and sought out sacrifices of love in reference to reach beyond this world to one unseen. Isn't that something to ponder on? Reach beyond the world of the unseen. However, present arrangements of these exiles of the ancient British graves, or excuse me, that's what it says, which suggests no less clearly the probability of human sacrifices, but some kind of immortality kind of concept that they thought this grave would give the great chieftain. So, and then they would put in ideas of, like, they would speculate in a barbaric rank, which cruel rites of known were practiced among the Mexicans, the Peruvians. On the largest scale, wives, that goes on to talking about immortality, and then they talk about the tomb of the deceit of the Inca, and some eases of numbers of thousands, but I want to bring this up. It references the Grave Creek Mound. It talks about the gigantic proportions, like we just said at the beginning of the other one with the Catholic book, and it talks about that there's large quantities of mica. There's mica ornaments and everything, and they're talking about the construction of why there is these mica ornaments. So I've seen mica necklaces and everything when it comes to these type of things when you're getting to Indian mounds. So everybody would say, what is mica, Brian? So get this. So mica is very well, this was one of those moments whenever I found this out like a year ago, that mica is literally found abundance in the mounds of Kentucky. The biggest in the world. There's other incidences of mica found in other states, countries, etc. But the most abundance of it was in Kentucky, which I will talk about here in a little bit. But isn't that just wild? Doesn't that just baffle the mind, right? So, what is mica? So mica, the first thought you'd think, is it conductive, Brian? Is it, what's going on here? So mica is a natural occurring mineral dust, often used in makeup foundations. I said it, makeup foundations. And Brother David and John Pounders, they do an awesome job on the Book of Enoch, Go look at the Book of Enoch, and it talks about what cosmetics and makeup, where that comes from. Isn't that kind of interesting? I'm just throwing that out there. A filler in cement and asphalt. And here's where it gets really interesting. As an insulation material in electrical cables to this day. It's an insulator material. So mica has a good thermal conductivity due to photons. No joke. But it doesn't have a significance for free electrons to be a good conductor of electricity. Therefore, mica is a bad conductor of electricity. But I wanted to bring this in because why? Why does the Mounds of Kentucky have the most abundance of mica? What is that? What's going on? Like, why is mica the most profound, area in Kentucky? What's going on there? What's up with that? So, to me, and if we're using it today, obviously we know that there's minerals, cobalt, rock asphalt, there's all kinds. Kentucky's got it, I promise you. These ancient people was teaching people how to do this. And that book, going back to the Catholic, with the Catholic one with the Niagara Peninsula, also they knew of a race of people. What are you gonna bet me? They taught whoever how to insulate these. I can only speculate on why the Mounds have abundance of mica here in Kentucky. I can only speculate. So, if you're just now tuning in, if you're just now seeing this, you're saying, well, Brian, you're rambling on here and going on. And if you're still a skeptic of the giants and their existence, let's get into Kentucky. Let's go to one. I'm gonna keep going. I've got a lot of time here, and stay tuned, folks. Get your popcorn, get you an extra cup of coffee, because we're going down the giant narrative realm today. And welcome to the program. So, speaking of Kentucky again, we're gonna go to another witness. Lewis Collins' Historical Sketches of Kentucky. It's a historical Kentucky, Volume 2. No joke. In this, in quote, I will read from this. And this is close to my neck of the woods, and it's kind of personal. It's kind of a personal thing. Let's get into it. So there's several mounds of remarkable size in this Madison County. But the most profound one, is ancient cemetery of race of giants on 5 high points, right? The burials of prehistoric inhabitants uncovered the skeletons of giants, the femur, the tibia, the skull, the inferior maxillary bones, so large when compared with the size of late John Campbell. And guess how tall old John Campbell was? You can't make this stuff up. John Campbell was 6'4". 6'4" at this account. It goes on. The jawbone, the inferior jawbone of this size of this giant in the cemetery, old John Campbell, is recorded here as he took the whole jawbone of the entirety over his own flesh and all. Like shoulders, knees, and toes, okay? The whole thing. So if that's not a witness, I don't know what is. And that, Lewis Collins can't even make this stuff up. In Kentucky, just one account. That's just one account. So, continue on. We're going to stay in Kentucky for a while too. So, we have, if that's not to convince that there's giants once roamed the earth, let's go a little deeper. So this location, the Cemetery of Giants, no joke. This location that we're referring to here in the Lewis Collins book, speaking of Trump again, I'm not making this up. The word on the street several years ago, Mr. Trump, not Donald Trump, but there was another Trump, his son, not his youngest son, I think it's his oldest son, was inquiring about this land that I just referred to. No joke. So, what is that? What is going on with that? Why is that even a thing? Why are we even having this conversation? And I'm telling you, and I will say it again, it is a powder keg of knowledge and agriculture. Dream the lands that are in my area. It will baffle your mind. And like I said at the beginning of the program, astonishment wouldn't even be the word. If you're out there and you say there's nothing to do in this world, I promise you there's plenty to do. There is plenty. There's a little inside humor. There is plenty to do. If anybody's out there and thinking there's nothing to do in this world, go giant hunting. And if you come to Kentucky, maybe come find me if I'm available, and we'll go hunting for the mounds. A little sarcasm there. So I'm going to read from a book. I've never read from this one. This is a book called The Glimpses of the Historic Madison County, Kentucky. End quote. I'm going to read from here. A lot to read here too. We're going to talk about copper armor, which I have a lot to talk about. There's copper armor excavation sites all over the place, and there's not been one person tell me why there's copper. Not an archaeologist, a paleontologist, anybody that can forge armor, or a blacksmith. They cannot tell me why there's copper armor. But I did have my answer earlier from the Lake Superior, how they acquired abundance of copper. But I digress. Let's go on here. So there's a fort mountain, and we have Dr. Burroughs again in this book that's referring to a location where the prehistoric mound and a summit of low knob copper armor plates, and it remains of a chief's skull. Here we go. Chief. Here we go. The great chieftain, right? And we're going to get into that a little bit more here in a little bit. Starting with the red rock of the black shale, and going upwards in the history of this mound follows. First, a fire was kindled upon the rock and shown of 8 inches of charcoal over a considerable area, overlaying the clay. Then flat rocks were laid to form a platform over which a mound of dirt was built. In this mound, the chief's head was buried with his copper armor plates and a medium-sized shell. He was a mature man where the cusp of his teeth were worn flat, by chewing hard, gritting food. That's what it says. These are 4 pieces of copper armor. 3 are flat smooth, and then it goes on talking about the dimensions. 7 by 5 inches, 4 by 3 inches, 8 and 4 inches. They are carved at both ends. Each has 2 holes through which was fastened the plates to the body, which I was like, man, could you imagine? These plates partially protected the chest and the abdomen, nor lower the edge of the breastplate was jagged hole evidently caused by an arrow or a spear. A fourth piece of copper in a shape resembling a cannon, that's what it says, a cannon, is 7.4 inches long, but 2.5 inches wide, and 1/6 of the inch thick. It was to protect the vital organs. Flat rocks have been laid over the mound all over the sides of the clay, covered the rocks. On what had the summit of the mound, there is a thick bed of charcoal containing a mass fragment of human bones. The charcoal and the bones laying, changing horizontally a charcoal with, and it goes on. No bones were where the fire had extended further. The group of victims had apparently been burned on the chest of the mound. The entire mound was been covered by clay and a large limestone rocks brought from the valley before were placed on the surface. It goes on. Talks about these mounds, and these fortifications. I'm gonna move on a little bit, but we're gonna get into the really, really interesting spots of this. So we want to get that context of what is going on. What's the evidence of these ancient books? Literally, they're not ancient, but what's these evidence of these scholars and these explorers back in the day? What did these professors, whoever these people are, what did they find? And I'm going to get into it. And what's so interesting, I will tell you this, these people's names, I know a lot of these people and their ancestors, no joke. It is so weird. It is so weird, the names and the people that are still around to this day. So I continue on here. So, French Tipton mentions mounds all over Madison County. He found that many burial places in northern Madison and near the Tage Creek area. The extraordinary quality. The burial mound was extraordinary quality, which I'm going to mention this. There's a particular mound that had a sarcophagus. That were walled and engraved 6 feet below the ground level, 4 feet above. It was an enclosure, 9 or 10 feet square with a flat stone floor and 2 feet below the ground level. In 1881, General James Runyon found a skull and several skeletons and supposedly spear point a foot long and plowing over a mound in Otter Creek with 3 miles of Richmond and accounted. However, the exploration of a mound near the village marbly. And then there was a Colonel Bennett Young, might well close this chapter. Bennett Young was a prominent civilian of Louisville. And it goes on talking about the newspaper at the time when this particular event happened with these excavations. So what we have here is not only what they say here, 18th, 19th of the July, I visited Madison County, second time in the explorations. The county is undoubtable the richest in the mounds of all the counties in the state. Some mounds are a marvelous, not only symmetrical, but of size. The one, and it goes on talking about another location in another one. There's nowhere, it says that not even, they're splendid. A chain of single mounds cannot be found anywhere in the United States. Let's continue on. It talks about they're doing partial excavations on one of these places. But here's where I want to point this out. We're going to get another witness here in this giant narrative in the Nephilim. We are on the pursuit of the Nephilim, of the giants on the earth everywhere. That's what this program's all about. So the next one on the list here, this is where it gets really interesting. They're talking about the mound that it was excavated not too far from me. This has an unusual importance. They found that the bones which will be hereafter described showed that the man was a person of tremendous stature and was much larger than the other persons who remained were inverted in this mound. The skeleton was found laying due east and west and was found at the place of natural surface, covered first with the rich loam and afterwards with the white clay. There were some ashes and charcoal and a stray of clay overlaying the skeleton. The skeleton, which was recovered, the lower jaw, almost perfect condition. The skull was apparently of a very large man. Come on. You can't make it up. And the bones would indicate that he had a third larger than those who were placed with him in the sepulcher. So the teeth had been somewhat worn, but showed no mark of decay of any point. And I want to point this out, what it's getting ready to say. Although this man had likely been buried for 500 years. So we have a gigantic stature gentleman, a tremendous stature, gigantic, got teeth worn down, or, it's got perfect teeth, all it's somewhat worn, but it's going to go on to it. But we have this 500, they're claiming at this point of excavation, they're dating it, that he had been buried for 500 years. So, it wasn't that long ago. His teeth were now so beautiful and white that they would command the admiration of any dentist of our period. And while the bones showed the effects of decay, as soon as exposed to the atmosphere which taken from the ground, they were solid and perfect. Near his head was placed a stale ornament. Unfortunately, it was stuck by a pick and broken, but both pieces was preserved near his toes, and any pendant made of a white stone, which had not been able to resist decay. It goes on. It talks about limestone and board, and it talks about these 6 spearheads standing on the end were placed between the feet, and immediately opposed his face was a square white stone. The evidence have been used. They're talking on and on about the way it was positioned, what was going on, the ceremonial concept. The 2.5 below the surface on the south side, we found another skeleton, the bones of which indicate a man about 5 feet 10 inches. So here's the thing, folks. Yes, there's mounds. Yes, Indians resided there. But they still worshiped the great chieftains, is what they refer to. These great, gigantic stature, massive burial sites. They would put people at the circumference of the base of the mound, and this is what they're referring to, a 5'10" gentleman. The thigh bones and part of the skull and the teeth were well preserved. The enamel of the teeth was so bright, and on this day was sorrowing friends had deposited his body in the top of the tomb. Charcoal and ashes. It goes on, talks about the preparing this character. Okay, so it goes on. Let's continue on. So this it talks about these people, the substance. It said, here's one that really blows my mind. Here and there, small fragments of mica were picked up. The substance is said to be always found in Kentucky mounds, like I referred to earlier, and it was believed by these people to have some mysterious power of influence in connection with the dead. So, folks, Anybody out here watching FOJC Underground Church? What is going on with that? What kind of nefarious thing are they even portraying? What is going on? There's a spiritual application. And they're admitting it right here in this book. The first skeleton discovered was clearly that of a man of distinction. Right, here we go. The manner of marking the spot of the secular was particular and unusual, and the three fleshers, the gordex, the pendant, the pipe, and the arrangement of the spear point from the showing the unusual honor have been shown to this mound builder of such proportions. They're talking about the gentleman here. I weighed 190 pounds, and I am close to 6 feet high, and yet the lower jaw could be easily put over the outside of the mind, or the gentleman. And his thigh bones and skull made it absolutely sure that he was at least 7 feet high. His fingers and toe bones maintained the same extraordinary proportions. So this so-called skeleton was wider in stature also, probably a lot larger than a linebacker in the NFL. Northeast of the Great Mound, there was a great man of a mound, and 2 feet higher we came upon another skeleton. The man was an ordinary size. Here's where it gets really weird. About 5 feet 10 inches high, and the method of the burial demonstrated how far less in appreciation. There was flints and depositories of that, and they was talking about the ranking, like he ranked lower. A little further east of the skeleton was found, and the top of the mound was located. But most of the curious of all these treasures were a mound of 2 copper beads. There's always this copper incorporation. They were 8.5 feet below the surface of the southwest quarter of the mound. And not in the connection with any remains. We saw 3, and they're welded together with these like bead and a hole through the center of like they attach them. And it goes on, it says composed of Lake Superior copper. I mean, it's literally, here's the witness of the Lake Superior, and hammered out into a straight bar and then bent around the stone welded. The most wonderful feature of these beads was the extraordinary accident, and one of them, the string which was held, had been perfectly preserved. All indications the mound had several hundred years old, and how through all the ages this section of this thread holding this bead was perfectly preserved was a marvel. But under a microscope, the fiber and the thread is well defined, and it was appearance of being made of linen of some bark. It was being carefully preserved and submitted for inspection to such experts and care to examine. The last thing on this book that I'm going to refer to, here's where it gets really interesting, and I know David and John did a time travel program. Here we are going to reference Trump one more time. This one will get your wheels a-turning. So everybody out there, hang on to your seat. This next part is kind of baffling. If anybody's watched the Time Travel Midnight Ride on Now You See TV, I suggest you all go back and watch that. It's really a good one. So here we go. What appears to be a fragment of a king's pipe was found near him on the right side. Here's what's really interesting. It has in it a black substance resembling, they say, nicotine. And then it goes on, I shall submit this to an analyst. They're like uneasy about it. Hoping the suggestion they will turn out to correct opinion of the deposit in the pipe stem. So they're like questioning what that black substance was. And I'll tell you this. There was a black substance found in sarcophaguses in Cairo, Egypt, just recently. Thieves and the Egyptian government, they all said it was the blood of the gods. Let that resonate in your mind. Let that settle in your mind for a little bit. Some doubts have been raised that these earth mounds of central Kentucky being placed the secular of these long lost race. But the contents of Maury Mound show that it goes on, that this was it was laid a man of huge stature and great distinction. Okay? It goes on, doubtless the spirits that depart the mound builders looked down on another world and wonder why hundreds of years afterwards men with curious minds, exploring hands, should open the tomb and bear from their scared respiratory of the bones. The mementos and the treasures where their tendering love hearts had promoted them to place within, and the deeds of their king to protrude renown of their mighty leader. At times there was little manifestation of superstition. When we were about to remove part of their skeletons, some humorous member of their party threw some clods into the trench. It's like superstition. There was considered a supernatural protest against these great, literally this whole degradation of excavations. And immediately all hands dropped their tools and rushed from the opening, exciting every moment that their ghost of the mound builder with avenging hand would inflict immediately dire punishment. And it was some moments before I could induce a portion of my workers to follow me back to work. They was having some little spiritual warfare. They was literally seeing things. And I've read more about this account, that some of these men did not do too well. They had some issues. There was something going on. Let's just say, like what they're referring to now in the world of UFOs. There was radiation, all kinds of nonsense. Back then, they could not pick it up. They didn't understand. They couldn't coherently understand the applications of the spiritual. They just couldn't understand it. They're saying it's superstition. There's a ghost wandering around trying to avenge the death, right? Avenge. And, it's just weird. So it goes on. So they, with much care and patience, they're trying to peel back these mounds, then peel back and get all this stuff going on to be able to carefully take care of the site. But I want to refer to that. So I looked into those men. They got sick, and there was all kinds of different things. I heard some of them passed. I couldn't make a distinctive 100% account that they died or anything like that. But isn't that interesting? Just to throw us in here real quick. It's weird. I got to watch what I say on recently with, there's a Joe and there's a gentleman, last name Carlson, interview with all kinds of spiritual application, and there was people passing away, and literally the government knows about it. So with that being said, wonder if the application would apply to this event in the glimpses of historical Madison County, Kentucky. What do you guys think? And I want to tell you a story. So this story, no joke, there's a story. This story, I just acquired a story not too long ago because I'm always asking questions and wanting to know, like, if anybody knows about the Nephilim or any kind of, if there's somebody that's local or native or really well known to the historically, or anything to do with if they've been on the land for like 60, 70 years. I had a gentleman that I knew that come across and just an acquaintance, and he did some work on my house. And no joke, he told me a story. 1970s, there was a man. At the time that this man was telling me, just recently here in 2023, this account in 1970 was literally not too far from here and not too far from this site that I'm referring to here in the glimpses of historical Madison County. 1970s, an account of a man told, like it was told long ago, to this gentleman. This gentleman was a kid. There was these two men not too far from here. There was a mound on one of the pieces of property. This man wanted to inquire about this property. The landowner said, "Stay away from the Indian mound. Do not dig there. I don't want you around it." And there was all this superstition. And back in the 70s, which that book I just read from, there's all this superstition and folklore analogies going around, people literally picking up these stories and fabricating it through time. So this guy wouldn't leave it alone. So he went against his wishes. This gentleman, he started to dig. We started to dig. No joke. He got scared. Literally, that night, he started feeling funny. And fear came over him. No joke. And this man was telling me, my mouth was like, man, what's going on here? So the neighbor that on the land told him that it's sacred ground. Well, here's what was really weird. That night, he went to bed, right? He took the shovel, started digging, and little did he know that this was going to happen. The night the man dug the mound up, right, was visited by literally a tall, large, what he described, large Indians. And from the account, the man was said not to go to the property again, but the man couldn't leave it alone. Even though he went to bed, had this epiphany or whatever, apparition, whatever it was that was going along, and he's seen all these Indians, these shadow men, all this stuff, and he had a, nightmare, whatever. He must have ate too much, right? So this guy could not leave it alone. It was something like he was spiritually driven to extract this, do something to this mound. No joke. He goes back. He waits for about a week. He goes back after all his trauma because he thinks there's treasure. He thinks there's like some type of significance. Okay? Little did he know that he was facing the devil right in the face. Like, literally. It was a huge mistake. He goes back, and that night, it goes back, and the tall men said that this is bad. Like, you had to face the consequences of what you've done. And the following day, I couldn't believe this man was telling me this in my yard. And the following day, in his house, he almost like died. His house burst into flames, and he barely made it out alive. I think it's very strange. You can literally compare the accounts of what I just referred to in those books. What's going on there? And, you talk about the UFO narrative and what they're broadcasting across the airwaves, and could it be one the same? Could all this stuff be correlated in some kind of... And I really agree. Back to the Genesis 6, verse 4, there was giants in the earth, the sons of God, and the giants, what Brother Carrico would say and John Pounders would say, when the book of Enoch speaks about the Nephilim, the Raphaim dying, and they become embodied spirits. And I think what this gentleman was seeing back in the 1970s was an encounter of a demonic spirit. No joke. Demonic spirit of the Nephilim written all over it. So no joke. So I got some really cool stuff. I've actually got some places and some footage, and I've actually got some pictures I want to show with you all on some of my encounters. So 2 years ago almost. This was in July of 2022. July 2022, I had no, I didn't even know. I was my wife planned this trip with some family. We was going to fellowship and meet halfway, and we was going to go to Tennessee. Okay. Had the opportunity to go to Tennessee, and we went to this location called Reelfoot Lake. Let me say this. I had no idea what this place was, any info on the location. My wife planned a camping trip, and we just went to the backcountry hinterland. Seriously, backcountry hinterland is the best I can say it. But little did I know it was going to be a trip that I would never forget, period. Period. So let's get into it. It was almost 2 years. It was extremely hot. You'll never forget that day. It was in July, extremely hot weather conditions. It was unbelievable. To be camping, bizarre. So when I got out of the passenger seat, I looked around. I was like, man, what is going on here? Look at this massive size of the lake. I knew it was a unique place right off the start. I knew it. And I needed to do some investigation. So I was like, okay. So the people we fellowship with helped me. We all helped each other get the tents up. And we popped our tent up. And I didn't really have a chance to comprehend, really, and get a layout of the land. It was late and the sun was going down. I had to wait till the next day to see to get the thought process, because I literally was camping on the side of the lake. And I already expected and guessed, and you guessed it, you're going to guess it, that there was a Nephilim and a giant connection. And I had, and that's all I had in my mind. So I went to bed, and I was like, okay, let's get up, let's go do our thing, and let's enjoy this day. Because of this enormous body of water, I knew with a shadow of a doubt that it was going to be an interesting trip. So I jumped right on into it, and I took my time, and I didn't really start asking questions. So we went to this location. I kid you not, this place it's a beautiful place. I just knew that there was significance, and somehow I just knew that I was driven, that God literally supernaturally had me there. It was just so strange. So no joke, you're going to laugh. So the next day we went to this local Dairy Queen. No joke. As you can see, it looks like something out of Time Machine, but literally this place, 1950s, 1960s, it's like a nostalgical, dream. Nostalgic Central is what you should call it. The town was so small. This is the only thing that I could really resonate with modern conveniences. I was thinking, man, what is this, So this lake and the farmland was beyond ordinary beauty. I mean, unbelievable. Okay, but the thing that got me intrigued was when my family was sitting down at lunch at a restaurant. This restaurant, literally a brochure and I got the brochure in my hand. I still have it. So the brochure, we're sitting down at this restaurant. We're sitting down at this restaurant right here, and literally a brochure on the wall. My son reaches over. And he was reading it, and because it's a tourist brochure, right? Brought it to my attention. He said, you think this? You might think this is interesting. So I started reading it, and to my astonishment, I was like, man, what is this information? And it got my wheels turning, right? And I'll show you the brochure too. She says, this is literally the brochure. I got it on, excuse me. I've got it right here. This is my brochure, and I'm going to read from it. So Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee is a very strange place, but I'm going to tell you something. Here's what it says. Here's another witness. So anybody's out there, skeptic, naysayers, here we go. How this lake was formed. Local Native American lore tells that the lake originated when a tribal chieftain, right? This is from the brochure, who was born with a deformed foot and was named Reelfoot. And here's where it gets really interesting. So we got a deformed foot, and I'm going to show you where I'm going with this. And then the next line, Reelfoot kidnapped a princess from a neighborhood tribe and hustled her off to his lowland hideout. Genesis 6 verse 4 teaching right there. The sons of God mated with the daughters of men, and they bore giants. And these tactics, these traditions was taught on and on and on. Y'all kind of getting the context here where I'm going? So he took, according to the legend, the great spirit of the great chieftain, stomped his foot in anger, rolling the earth like a blanket. The father of the waters raised the big river over the banks, covering Reelfoot's homeland. The water flowed into an imprint left by the great spirit's foot, forming our beautiful lake. Since its suspicious beginnings, western Tennessee's Reelfoot Lake was become one of the most richest and most unique ecosystems in the region. And I'm going to get to that. Therefore, for the year, it was offered endless opportunities for hunting, fishing, vacation, and birding. So there's that brochure. So here's where it gets even interesting. So not only do we have a great chieftain again, like all the books I've read tonight, all of them, there's like this great chieftain, people are worshiping, there's all this consistency, there's similarities here of worshiping the gigantic, the tremendous stature gentlemen's. Well, I said gentlemen's. So the next one. So here's where it gets really blown away. So it happens to be on this trip that some things, compelling information kept coming to life, like on and on, when I started asking questions. And let's just say some of the comments was not well received during this trip. Not at all. But fast forward to the highlights. I went to a Reelfoot Lake souvenir shop. You can't make this stuff up. I went to a Reelfoot Lake souvenir shop, and I found a woman that spoke about the area. I won't disclose much about her, just because for personal reasons. I don't want to ever disrespect somebody. But I asked her if anybody had ever approached her about giants and Nephilim, Raphaim, Mounds, etc. Her eyes glazed over and was like amazed at the reason why. She's like, "What?" She literally, that day, July 2022, that summer, little did I know, like I had no clue what I was even doing there. Okay, little did I know, her eyes glazed over. She said, prior to me being there, okay, she looked like her face was puzzled, and she looked at me and she said, a very wealthy man of a Chinese descent with like a two-piece suit and all, like a suitcase, showed up inquiring about the same thing I was talking about. But hey, literally, I'm not rich or wealthy. I'm just asking because I'm just trying to inquire about mounds and, giants, stuff like that. I was just wanting to know more info about, found on the brochure in Dairy Queen. Some people got really aggravated when I spoke about the brochure at Dairy Queen. I said, I found all this information on a brochure at Dairy Queen because I was inquiring about mounds, but they didn't like it. It was not well received. There was some small threatening. Let's just say that. That's all I'm going to say. So she proceeded to tell me it was very odd. Like she's wanting, that this Chinese, this man with two-piece suit on, wealthy man, Chinese descent, was saying land it was like a big red flag for her because he was inquiring. He knew all the land. Like he knew all the names, street, he was so adamant about like, hey, I need to inquire. I need to figure out how to buy and contact and get some information from these owners. So she never heard anything about it again after she was like, saying, hey, we might need to fix this or whatever. But what was so bizarre about it, anything strange about the natives, right? She wasn't, when I was asking her about natives or anything, and there's like this real, very sinister backstory to Reelfoot Lake. So it's like really kind of like, shh, hush, hush. And, I don't even want to elaborate and comment on it, but here's what I found out. So, but what I wanted to stay on with the topic with her was giants. So my question was, after I've heard about that story about the man in a two-piece suit and inquired about Nephilim and giants and all this stuff, and supposedly higher distinction of as far as, had expensive clothes on, for all I know. I don't know nothing about it. So I asked her this one question, and I said, by any chance, are you local from here? And she said, yeah, I've been born and raised here. So I was like, all right. So I asked if anything, you can't make this stuff up. The souvenir shop was with, Indian arrowheads, all this memorabilia of Indians. It was nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't get any inkling, nothing of like, cryptic creatures or, giants, Bigfoot, anything like that. Didn't get inkling of any of it. So I asked her, here's the question I asked her. Since the great chieftain had a deformed foot, I asked her, did she know of anybody that had a birth defect? Of extra finger, extra toe, etc. And she looked at me and told me she had a family member that was born with 6 toes. My jaw, like literally, you're talking about jaws falling off, jaws dropping. The most compelling thing on top of it was the magnet. No joke, folks. The magnet. And you're going to be like, what is up with the magnet? I'm going to show you that magnet. And I got the proof right here. A magnet. So as you can see, there's 6 toes. There's 6 on one side and 6 on the other. She was selling these. This is the only thing that I could find with an inkling of anything to do with the Nephilim or anything to do with that that content. So I couldn't believe it. And she said that she thought it was just cool, so she had these to sell. I thought it was strange, and she's like, well, it reminded me of my family member, so she just like thought it was cool. Like, hey, it was sell to the shop. Once again, I'm thinking, man, is this a spiritual thing? Obviously there's something going on here. It's really strange that my only human capacity can only, contain only so much. So from the shop itself, I never seen anything like it. Like the claims to, like I mentioned earlier, like I didn't see anything on there. I didn't see anything that would come to the conclusion there was a 6 fingers or anything like that. So here's where it's going to get fun. So we got some show and tell footage. I've never shown this part, and I hope you all enjoy it. This one is really interesting, and this is some footage here. So one moment. So what we have here, literally, no joke, footage. There's no audio. I'm going to talk about it. Remember how I was talking about the ecosystem in that brochure? You can find a lot out about with the brochure at Reelfoot Lake. But as you can see on the screen here, these trees is what's sticking out There's distinctively just all over the place. And I'm going to narrate this video as it plays. And I'm going to tell you what was told to me. And I can't wait. So let's just let it roll, and I'm going to narrate through it. So as I'm walking, here I am. I got a cane. A lot of people don't know my story, but I got some balance issues, visual issues, and all that good stuff. So here I am trying to, so forgive me that the videography is not professional. It's a little shaky. Got a tripod and all that good stuff, and I'm sitting there trying to navigate through it. So forgive me. But anyways, anybody got the eyes to see here? We got some crazy stuff here in the lake, at the Reelfoot Lake. So as you can see the beauty, and these trees are all over the place. There's these unique trees everywhere. That year, that summer, there was a huge storm come through. Tornadoes all over Kentucky, in the Mayfield, Paducah area, all that. And this, where Reelfoot Lake is not too far from the Kentucky state line. So this water, it's just so beautiful out there. I took multiple pictures and you can see the trees, all these trees. You can see trees popping up in the water. And I had no clue, like I said, anybody out there, I had no clue where I was at. I got all this. I was there for about, like 4 or 5 days, I think. This water, and little did I know, I was getting ready to walk. I don't have the footage. Out of respect, there was a woman I ran into another native lady. And I kid you not, I was going walking to do my business on another day besides this one, because I had to go back because I got, well, you know, it wasn't a problem. I got interrupted from that woman. She was crying and all this stuff, and she was literally just there praying and talking to her, you know, talking out loud, and I came upon her. It was like a divine intervention moment. So as I start to walk here, I'm just kind of getting a little bit of a feel for, you'll see this, you'll see as I walk on right here, all the beauty, all these tree systems and everything. So I'm getting ready to, let's just fast forward a little bit because we can still see everything. So I'm getting ready to go to the pier here, and I'm getting ready to go down this, so check this out. So all these trees right here have been damaged from the storm. So as I pursued on here, and I'm going out to the lake to literally just look over the whole thing and get my really good bearings about it. So the day before, because I went back and videoed this, there was a woman as I was walking. She was right here. She was a local. I kid you not, we went from one thing to another, and I asked her what her problem, you know, what was going on. She was crying. She said, this is the last place that my poor brother resided at. He passed away. And I didn't ask her how. I didn't get into any of her business. But man, it really hit home to me. So I stood there and listened to her story. I turned my camera off, you know, for audio purposes. I didn't want any of it, even though the stuff she was telling me was like some black ops, like Men in Black stuff, right? So we're sitting here at the end of here, looking out on this beautiful land. She told me about her, you know, family and everything. I asked her if she's local. Then after she started, you know, kind of getting a little bit better as far as not crying and just so upset, I started asking her about the locals in the area. And here's where it gets weird. Here's where it gets really bizarre. So not only do this brochure at Dairy Queen tell you about that the great spirit of Reelfoot chomped down, did some kind of earthquake activity. I'm going to pause it right here. But you can see as the pier went on, the deck here went on out, but then the storm came. They had a storm. This was a newer deck, so to speak, at the pier here. So anyways, we're sitting here, and I'm having this conversation with this lady, literally. And right here, she told me there was an island, and she remembers it was like 1985. There was a sarcophagus of a large Indian. They say it was the great Chieftain. No joke. It was still protruding out of the water from that great earthquake. As she proceeded to tell me more, because I started inquiring about what I knew about Nephilim and the Genesis 6 narrative and all these different things, she said, I've been waiting on somebody to talk to about this. And she said, you see this right here? And I asked her, I inquired, I said, those are some beautiful trees. It reminds me about the trees of Lebanon and the trees of Enoch that reached the tallest cedars and all this stuff that reached into the heavens. She goes, you see these trees here? She said, there's twigs. I said, excuse me? She said, there's trees that are large, that are on the floor, the base, or literally and underneath the water, that are triumph, the giant forest, the giant trees. Once again, we have the connection of the giant forest. And I asked her, I said, where's those mounds? Because I said, Dairy Queen, the brochure's telling me something. Where's those mounds at? Where's this ancient? She said, you're looking at it. I said, excuse me? She said, all the mounds and all this ancient stuff, everything that the prehistoric man, the city is underneath the water. I said, you got to be kidding me. So get this. 1985, some deep pocket individual came, and the sarcophagus that was literally, they had some other kind of weather phenomenon or something, and the little island started sinking. So they knew the importance, and they had to excavate the sarcophagus and get it off there. 1985, somebody with big pockets, not the Smithsonian, folks. Big pockets come from she said from another country. She didn't know how to answer where from, and bought it. So what is it? Did they buy Reelfoot? Was Reelfoot on display somewhere, or is it but presented tonight? But it was just like fitting like a fine-tuned, it was just like a fine-tuned machine as far as all the data collected. So what is up with that? So Reelfoot Lake is a mystery. And when you have 3-letter agencies involved, and you have a prehistoric village that is right here underneath all this, and you have probably evidence of no telling what, as far as giants or prehistoric man or any kind of gold treasures, etc. What's going on here? What's going on? So one more thing, and it's going to get fun. I love doing these types of programs. One other thing, let's get into the last subject matter. So there's Reelfoot Lake, but let's go to somewhere else where it's kind of more lighthearted, and let's get into it. So there's the Six Toes. Get this. So, excuse me. We've been to this location, as you can see, Sevierville, Tennessee. I did a program on the Indian Mounds, and we did this program on Sevierville. I've aired it on FOJC Underground Church. But no joke, this Indian Mound is right in the middle of nowhere. It's not in the middle of nowhere. It's out in the middle of the city in Sevierville. The McMahon Indian Mound, right? This Mississippi, it's a substructure of 16 feet high and 200 feet in circumference. And it's talking about excavated in 1881 with artifacts being sent to the Smithsonian. Later excavations exposed nearly villagers of woodland Indian dating from 200 AD to the Cherokee who roamed the valley when the pioneers settled in the late 1700s. Yeah, I know we went from Kentucky to Tennessee to Mississippi. We've been all over the place. But hey, we're 2 hours in almost, and we could probably spend another 5 hours on this topic. And there's so much evidence of prehistoric man, giants, and Nephilim. So check this out. There's this like elaborate, like beautiful, constructed, the gardening, all the flowers and everything. And it's literally a mound. There's a Shoney's restaurant. There's a hotel that way. And there's like a Burger King across the street. And here's what it says. Johnny Temple family conveyed the McMahon Indian Mound site, the city of Sevierville, on December 28th, 1987. This site is to be kept as a public trust and should not be disturbed due to the historical archaeological significance. So there's some more footage here of the mound protruding out of the ground, and you'll miss it. I mean, you'll drive right by, you'll be all excited about going into Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg and Sevierville, and there's all kinds of tourist attractions. And you can see the size. It's worn down. This mound has been worn down over time. And it's called the Landmark End. So there you go, Landmark. X marks it. No, I'm just kidding. Landmark, marks the spot there. So, and then the next one, there's extra bonus. So not only this location, Sevierville and everything, one thing I'm going to mention real quick. Remember I mentioned the Chahokee Mounds in Illinois earlier in the broadcast. No joke. The Birdman. There's Birdman insignia all over in the Illinois and the pyramid up there in Chahokee. I'm getting ready to go soon, just saying. And praise God. But my point is the Birdman, there's Birdman emblems, Birdman been extracted from this mound. No joke. Birdman. I mean, why is there Birdman in Sevierville in this mound? Who knows? Let's continue on. The last topic tonight. This place. This is in Indiana. This is the Angel Mounds in Indiana. No joke. That is a great mound. This is the town so-called square, but it's a circle. This, no joke. I've been on it. You can actually walk up it. But the great chieftain resided there. Once again, the great chieftain. When we went to go talk about and comment on the area locally and getting some of the information, they'll shun you. Oh, it's prehistoric man, or it's Indian, it's Adian. Great chieftain lived there. Great chieftain resided there. That's the story. So you can see, I don't have a person standing beside it, but it's pretty significant walk up, and you can walk all around that area. Indian Mounds, Angel Mounds, no joke. In Indiana. So there's the conclusion to the program with little warriors getting ready to take on the Nephilim. But yeah, so I hope everybody's enjoyed this program, because I sure have. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I could have went on for hours upon hours. We covered everything from electric cables to Indian mounds to the great chieftains. What do you guys think? If anybody is a skeptic, if anybody's out there that doesn't believe in the Nephilim, that says it doesn't exist, I hope I changed your mind. I hope this was edifying to you. I hope you actually got something out of it. I hope it was very informative, and I hope it was a blessing to you all. I really do. I hope it was. I really enjoyed it. I didn't get a chance to even see the chat because I was just literally engaged into the program tonight. So if everybody hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, I really, 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 really appreciate it. Share this thing out. It would help us with the algorithm like I reported at the beginning of the program on FOJC. Just to throw us in here, if you would like to join Visual Disturbance channel, that is my channel. If you'd like to join it, links in the description. I really would like to have you over there. I hope everybody's enjoyed this giant program. A big shout out to Donna and David Carrico for allowing me to do this program. I really enjoyed it. It's nothing but a blessing. I want to tell everybody to pray for Donna and David. Pray for supernatural protection. Pray that she can get healed and come back and be 100 times better than what she was going into all that. They've been through it here lately. So, yeah. So big shout out to Brother David. A big shout out to everybody in the FOJC team that makes this happen. Everybody, if it's a small thing to a big thing, we have a good crew, and we're so blessed to be part of it and be a body and just be part of this. So, everybody, I hope it was a blessing. I hope you got some understanding of the Raphaim, the Nephilim, and this real quick. You know what's so bad? You know what's so strange about it? No joke. This I only covered 3 states? Well, excuse me, a couple states. And the data is everywhere. Everywhere. You can go across to, literally, I was going to go to the Ring of Brogard. You can go out east, you can go out west. You can find evidence of giants everywhere. And at the end of the day, how can you disregard and say that there's no such thing as giants? How can you say there's no such thing as the sons of God? How can you say that it's the sons of Seth? How do you know? How can you just discredit all that and say it doesn't exist? And I can assure you, there's been partial excavations, full-blown excavations, but there's some in Kentucky that's not been excavated. Period. Zero. I have no evidence of it. And they've been passed down for 300 to 500 years. And nobody, and guess what? 300 or 500 years, generations, people are going to forget. And if you don't write it down, or if you don't put it on a piece of, a tablet, you're not going to be able to pass it down. So, anybody out there that's got any information on it, and you would allow us to go on private property, I promise you, it would just be such an endeavor and such a blessing if you would allow that, if there's private property out there somewhere. So, anyways, be blessed. It has been a good program. I miss my partner today, my brother in Christ, Brother David Carrico. He's always hosting, but I'm just co-hosting. What an honor it is to host this program on FOJC Underground Church. Please share this out. I really appreciate everybody being here. It has been such a blessing. God bless everybody, and have a good night. Brian Reese is out. Y'all have a blessed day. See you on the next one. Hopefully we'll be back on next week on Sunday Night Live, and everything is well with Brother David. But yes, folks, subscribe and thank you. Share this out. I'm out of here.
These people.
Cold.
You know one thing I forgot? The one thing I forgot, and I just thought of it, everybody. I couldn't get off here without saying high five and good night, everybody. From FOJC, I messed it up, but I think me and Brother David's doing another thing, a new trend here. You know, it's going to be the boom, boom, hit that like button. I forgot. Man, forgive me, everybody, but I'm back for just a few seconds. The boom, boom, or high five and good night, everybody. But one thing that I forgot most importantly, Jesus Christ is King, and blessed be his name upon all generations. I don't care if Nephilim are running up down the street. Christ is King, and I ain't got time for no demonic activity. I ain't going to be going around playing with all the demonic spirits. I'm going to be putting a full armor of God on, Ephesians 5, Ephesians 6. We're going to be rocking this thing. Praise be to Jesus' name. Bless you all. Y'all have a good night. Thanks for attending with us. Everybody have a blessed day. See you on the next one.